Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is zoom in, zoom out. We're going to be talking about perspective and how everything changes based on whether we are looking at things in a narrow or a wider focus, and each has its place. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the pressure, the temperature, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind, and good morning to everybody else who's joining us this morning. It's so good to be here with you. So today we are talking about perspective and zooming in and zooming out. And there are benefits to both, for sure. The thing is to remember that we have the option to narrow our perspective and focus more precisely, or stand back and see a bigger picture. And both of these are a phenomenal strategy to shift a way of being, to allow ourselves ease in many ways. So there are times when we feel really scattered, where we're considering all these different things and we have something that needs doing. That's a great time to zoom in and focus our attention, narrow our view to be able to address the task at hand. That can be a really powerful strategy. Then there are other times, and I think that this is when most of us forget, when we get very hyper focused on something and we put a lot of attention on worrying about it, or being really attached to a certain point of view and feel closed in and limited and stressed. That's a really good time to be able to zoom out and see the bigger picture. That all of a sudden, all kinds of forces come into play that weren't even visible when we were all zoomed in. So we get to see more of the dynamics of a system when we zoom out. And it was very interesting. This zoom in, zoom out came up in a session with a client. And what they noticed is that when they were zoomed in, everything was static. Everything was still. And when they zoomed out, there was fluidity and motion. And if we think about that, when we're zoomed in enough, it may be that it looks like, we're just focused on one point. And when we're focused on one point, there's no movement. And so it can be very much an experience of feeling stuck because we're so zoomed in, because things are static. And if we then have the presence of mind to stand back, to zoom out, then we often can have a greater sense of fluidity in the interrelationship of things, and things tend to make more sense because we can see them in a larger context. It allows us to be freed from sort of a stagnant vantage point. So I invite you to practice this because it's such a powerful, powerful mechanism of awareness and also expansion. You know, you think about, we could also think about zooming in and zooming out as expanding or contracting. There are times for each. However, I think we tend to get locked into a particular mode. We tend to get locked into this narrowed view. And there are many times where it just isn't serving us, even a little. It can serve to have us remain stuck. And what we notice is that when you zoom out, you have a bigger radius or locus of focus, you know, where you're seeing more, you're seeing how things interact with each other. You're seeing different influences at play. You're seeing something that is more alive. It makes me think of how in our mechanistic model of the universe, we have tended to believe that we can understand something by pulling it apart into its component pieces. And it's true that by pulling things apart into their component pieces, we can get an understanding of the components or what they are, what they might be, but we don't necessarily get an understanding of how the system works. And so it reminds me in, I guess it was junior high school, we were dissecting a frog, and it would have been one thing if we were dissecting one frog, but we each had a frog to dissect. And I just was horrified that all these frogs were being cut up by little girls that didn't, you know, for what? When we could have maybe even, well, we couldn't at that time have had a virtual frog, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But the thing is, to be able to see all the different parts and pieces of a human being or of a living being doesn't give you an understanding of what that living is or where it actually comes from, and how those parts work. Because as soon as we cut it up, those parts are no longer functioning. So we're not witnessing how they work within the system. And so one of the massive paradigm shifts that we're hopefully undergoing, and that we certainly need to undergo as a species, is to move into a richer awareness of systems thinking rather than taking things down to their components. And maybe it's not mutually exclusive, but there's a complementarity here that's essential, that we can get a better sense of the workings of things, and what affects what in a living system. So Rosalind says, at a closer view, the component or smaller step may reveal the step is not needed. That's an interesting vantage point, Rosalind, for sure. I wonder, as we, in a closer view, it may be that we are focusing on the steps and we don't see their relation to the larger picture. It seems to me that maybe as we look at the larger picture, we might have a better idea of what steps might not be needed. I'm not, either way, shifting our perspective is going to give us greater insight, right? So I appreciate what you're saying. The other thing is a time when smaller steps can be really, really powerful is when we're in the process of facing something that is unfamiliar or new or frightening, something that gives us anxiety, and that we create anxiety around. And if we look at the end goal, it's like an impossible goal. Like, how do I possibly do that? Whereas if I can focus on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing instead of the whole big thing, I more likely will be able to continue to put one foot in front of the other. And so that's a time when narrowing our focus can be super powerful, because then we're not overwhelmed by the bigger picture. And then we can allow ourselves to take the necessary next action. So the power of focus, it's a tool. It's a really, really excellent tool that we have to be able to modify and calibrate our being state. When we think about, for instance, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And it can be so overwhelming that we do nothing because we don't know where to start, or it just feels like it's an endless list, and like we'll never be able to get it taken care of. However, if we use the bigger picture to be able to create that strategy and then narrow our focus to what's right here, right now, then that's achievable. Typically, it's achievable to just take the next step, one more step, and one more step, and one more step. And periodically, obviously, you need to zoom out and look. So it occurs to me that this is something that shows up in the work that I do with people, because their experience is their step-by-step piece. They know where they are right now, but they don't often, unless I'm encouraging them, they don't often stand back and look at where they've come from and where they are, and the distance that they've come. They often feel like this moment is all moments, like this moment is all there is. And yes, this moment is all there is, but when you're engaged in therapeutic processes or transformational processes, it's super powerful to be able to identify and celebrate your progress. And I have a couple clients who are focused more on how they want it to be without recognizing how much progress they've made toward their ultimate objectives. And in fact, they now have ultimate objectives that they couldn't even conceive of previously. So, it's fascinating to recognize the source of our perspectives. because oftentimes I see people operating out of, it's never enough. It's never enough. It's never good enough. It's never enough. And in that never enoughness, there is a persistent lack of satisfaction. A lot of people feel that if they were satisfied, they'd become complacent. I think that if people were satisfied, they might become joyful, and maybe even inspired, because you feel that satisfaction and then a new impulse arises. Rosalind says, limited by time or resources being the obstacle. Limited by time or resources being the obstacle. Well, I think sometimes we are on a time deadline and we have the resources we have, we don't have more resources. So sometimes those time and resources can be a limit. And oftentimes our perception of time and resources is our limit. So oftentimes we have an urgency that may be misplaced, or we believe we need certain resources that we don't need. Or we believe that we can't access the resources that we don't have. So there are all kinds of beliefs that we have that are driving our experience and our perspective. And with this notion of not good enough, so I see that in some of my clients where the progress they've made, they're seeing what isn't the way they want it versus what is. And I think that attitude of glass half full is something that could be impacting this time and resources thing as well. It may be that I think that we often put time delimiters on things in ways that don't serve us, that we believe are realistic, but they don't, it doesn't serve our ultimate intention. And when we can release ourselves from that constraint of time, there's a whole lot more freedom. I know that setting deadlines can be a really powerful motivator. It's like, I have to have it done by this time, and I'm going to do what I need to do to get that to happen. I know that deadlines can be very motivating for me. They also can be very stressful and overwhelming, and the cost of it emotionally and energetically can be super extreme. So I know I've been talking about this course that I'm developing, and I had intended to have it done by the end of this month, and it's just not going to happen. And I could be pressuring myself to do that. And what I realized is that I am already kind of overextended. And if I put pressure on myself to do that, I would be pushing myself over the limit. So now my intention is to be working on that in September. I'm going to release it before the end of the year, that for sure. But what I did was, rather than holding to this time constraint that I had, I relieved myself of it. And that's serving me much better. It's allowing me to care for myself in a better way rather than pushing myself to a point of stress. So this is another, or to a point of negative stress. Sometimes stress can be a beneficial thing, but it's a matter of degree, right? We want to have maybe a little bit of pressure, but too much pressure pushes us over the edge. So noticing a state of overwhelm, noticing a state of too much. In fact, it was interesting to notice this morning, I was starting to feel, like there was a lot, like there was too much. And I noticed this sense of anxiety and tension, and just was able to bring myself back, zoom out, look at what, in the scheme of things, what my priorities are, and then how I can address them, and relieving the pressure of time, or modifying it so that it was manageable. So the thing is that for the most part, time doesn't manage us, we manage time, or we manage our time, right? And most of the time, there aren't super pressures. Well, I guess that depends in, for instance, what kind of job you're in and the urgency. People create all kinds of urgency around things that really aren't urgent. And I think it's challenging to be discerning in that regard, to recognize what's urgent, what's not urgent. And I have the privilege, and it's not by accident, of being able to make my own determinations, being my own boss. I say I would be a terrible employee. I say I don't play well with others, but it's not really true. I play really well with select others. And that's not always the case in the workplace, right? But being able to set my own schedule is something that is really an essential thing for my own well-being. We all have different temperaments. Some of us thrive in routine. Some of us thrive in variability. Some of us need a mix, weighted one way or the other. But knowing these things about ourselves is a really important thing, and can really lead us to much greater satisfaction in our lives. So in order to see those kinds of patterns, here we can go back to the zoom in, zoom out. If we zoom out, we can see patterns that repeat, that allow us to determine when we thrive, what kind of circumstances we thrive in versus what kind of circumstances we wilt and wither in. So I think there's tremendous power in this zoom in, zoom out kind of idea, and being able to have the flexibility to do both, and to discern when is the best time to do one or the other, right? When is a good time to zoom out? Usually when we're feeling really stuck is a great time to zoom out, to get a broader perspective on things. When we're feeling overwhelmed, that might be a good time to zoom in. So I think it can actually be that simple. I think it actually can be that simple to say, okay, what am I going to do? So one of the things that I had read in one of these productivity trainings, and I don't even remember who it was from, might have been Robert Allen's coming to mind, but I don't know if that's the one. But anyway, where when you have a task to do, you're trying to schedule tasks. So let's say you have a website to put up. You don't list the task as build website, because that entails all these different things. And in and of itself, it's so big. So what instead you do is itemize the tasks, because then it's little bites. And then you, if you have 5 minutes here or 10 minutes there, you can do this one or that one or the other one. And you don't have to be overwhelmed with, oh my God, it's going to take me a week to develop this website, or 2 weeks or a month or whatever it's going to be. You can focus on each individual bit and piece, and that then makes it manageable. So you do a brain dump of all the different components, all the different tasks. Maybe you can't do this until you make a phone call about that. So the phone call is a discrete task, and then the thing that's dependent on the phone call. And that can really, really help a lot to be able to minimize the overwhelm. So that's zoom out, see all the component pieces, zoom in, take one at a time. And so this shift of perspective, you can see where it's a super, super profound tool. And I encourage you to try it out. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to check out all the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And as always, it's a fabulous privilege to be able to have this time to share these morning musings together. And until next time.